The day had started like any other birthday, with bright sunlight streaming through the window, casting a warm glow across the kitchen. I could hear the sizzle of bacon and the soft hum of Emma's favorite playlist in the background. The aroma wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, pulling me into the moment. I had always loved my birthdays. They felt like a gentle reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still part of this beautiful, chaotic tapestry of family life. But today, as I stood at the counter, flipping through a stack of cards, I noticed an undercurrent in the celebration, something that made me pause. Emma, my sweet daughter, was acting oddly. She smiled brightly, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a shadow that seemed to deepen every time she glanced at me. I brushed it off, attributing it to the stress of planning the day. She had always been the ambitious one, taking on too much, wanting everything to be perfect. I set down the card from my sister and turned to the kitchen doorway. There was Jake, Emma's husband, leaning casually against the frame, his arms crossed over his chest. He wore that familiar, supportive smile, but I could sense a tension in his stance. It was as if he was waiting for a signal, a cue that would set him into motion. Unbeknownst to me, the two of them were orchestrating something behind the scenes, a hidden agenda wrapped in layers of love and concern. "Mom," Emma called, her voice bright, almost too bright. "Why don't you come sit? We have a surprise for you." My heart fluttered. A surprise? Perhaps a gift I didn't see coming, something to make me feel cherished. I walked toward the living room, each step heavy with the weight of my curiosity. I loved surprises, but today an unease nestled in my stomach, coiling tighter with every passing moment. What was brewing beneath the surface? As I settled onto the couch, Jake disappeared into the hallway. I noticed Emma's eyes flicking toward the door, her fingers drumming a nervous rhythm against her thigh. The air felt charged, thick with unspoken words. I opened my mouth to ask what was happening, but before I could utter a sound, Emma was on her feet, her smile faltering for just a second. I'll just be a minute," she said, her voice wavering. Just stay here, okay?" I nodded, but suspicion crept in like a thief in the night. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Instead of relaxing, I leaned forward, watching the door with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. The clock ticked louder, each second stretching into eternity. Finally, after what felt like eons, Emma returned her expression a careful mask of calm. She brushed her hair back, the gesture almost instinctual, and sat down beside me on the couch. The warmth of her body next to me felt comforting, yet I could sense the tension radiating off her in waves. "Mom," she began, her voice steady, "there's something we need to talk about." I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of vanilla candles and unspoken truths. "What is it, Emma? You're scaring me." She hesitated, her eyes darting to the hallway where Jake had disappeared again. It's about your safety, about us, as a family." A lead weight dropped into my stomach. Safety? What did she mean? I studied her face, searching for the little tells I'd known since she was a child. The way her brow furrowed when she was nervous, the way her lips pressed together when she was trying to hold something back. "Maggie," Jake's voice called from the hallway, pulling my attention. It was laced with urgency. The moment I turned to look, I caught sight of him moving back into the room, his expression serious. "Can we talk?" "Talk about what?" I asked, my voice rising slightly in pitch. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears like a warning bell. He exchanged a glance with Emma, a silent conversation passing between them, and I felt an icy grip of fear settle deep within me. "We need to change the locks on the house." "What?" The word slipped out, barely a whisper. "Change the locks? Why? What's going on?" "Mom, please," Emma urged, her tone softening as she reached for my hand. I pulled away, the gesture instinctual, as though her touch had burned me. "There's someone who's been trying to get in. "We didn't want to worry you, not on your birthday, but we can't keep this from you anymore." A tidal wave of confusion crashed over me, threatening to drown my thoughts. My mind raced through the implications. Someone? Trying to get in? What did she mean? Who? "I can't say," Jake said, his voice low and steady, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. "We need to act now. It's not safe for you here." The room spun as I grappled with the reality of their words. My sanctuary, my home, was no longer a safe haven. I felt the walls closing in, a claustrophobic sensation tightening around my chest. I had spent my life crafting a space of comfort and independence, and now it felt like the very foundation beneath me was crumbling. "Why are you doing this? Why now?"
Emma swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Because I love you, Mom. I can't stand the thought of something happening to you. I've been trying to protect you." "By what? Locking me in?" I snapped back, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Do you really think that's what I need? To be consigned?" "Mom, you don't understand," she pleaded, her voice cracking just a little. "This isn't just about you. It's about us as a family. We're trying to keep you safe, but it's also about us finding a way to live our lives without fear." I could see the conflict warring within her, a young woman desperate to carve out her own life while grappling with the weight of responsibility for her mother. I could feel the squeeze of my own vulnerabilities, the recognition that I had failed to see the shadows lurking in the corners of my life, and it stung. "Emma," I whispered, my voice softer now, "I need you to trust me too. I'm still your mother. I'm capable of making my own choices, even the hard ones." But deep down, I knew the truth. True freedom often comes at the cost of painful truths, and in that moment, I was caught in a web of love and fear, a delicate balance that threatened to unravel everything we had built together. In the suffocating silence that followed, I could feel the weight of our unspoken fears, the complexities of familial love swirling around us like a tempest. I had fought so hard to maintain my autonomy, to prove that I was still strong and independent, but now I faced the reality of my own vulnerabilities. And as I looked into Emma's pleading eyes, I couldn't help but wonder, how far would I go to protect the very thing I had tried to maintain all these years? The clock continued its relentless ticking, and I realized that the choices we faced were not just about safety or love, but about the intricate dance of independence and connection that defined us all. "Mom, please," Emma's voice broke through my thoughts, her fingers trembling as they brushed against mine. "Help me understand. Help us find a way that honors both of us." I searched her face, the lines of worry etched deeply across her brow, and I felt the walls of my heart begin to crack. Could I truly embrace the painful truths that lay ahead? Could I accept that love sometimes meant surrendering, even when it felt like losing? As I drew in a shaky breath, I realized that the room was poised on the edge of something monumental, a turning point waiting to unfold. I was no longer just a mother protecting my autonomy. I was a woman standing at a crossroads, ready to confront the shadows that had quietly invaded my life. And just as I opened my mouth to speak, to bridge the chasm that had formed between us, the doorbell rang, echoing through the silence like a gunshot. The moment hung suspended in time, a fragile thread weaving our fates together just as easily as it could tear us apart. I turned to Emma, my heart racing, knowing that whatever lay beyond that door could change everything. "Are you ready?" Jake asked, his voice low, and I saw Emma's grip tighten around my hand, both of us caught in the gravity of the moment. Ready was a word that felt foreign now, but perhaps it was time to step into the unknown. As I took a deep breath, I felt a flicker of something, a flicker of hope mingled with fear, and in that moment, I realized that the journey toward understanding, toward true freedom, was just beginning.
the sun crept through the sheer curtains of my bedroom, casting soft, golden rays that danced across the walls like warm whispers. I blinked awake, a smile already forming at the corners of my mouth as the reality of the day washed over me. Today was my birthday, and while I had learned over the years that celebration sometimes meant nothing more than a dinner and a cake, this year felt different. It was as if the universe had decided to add a little extra sparkle to my life, beckoning me into a day filled with potential. I stretched and felt the familiar creak of my joints, a reminder of all that I had lived through. 55 years. The thought made my heart flutter with a mixture of pride and apprehension. I rolled over and glanced at the small alarm clock on my nightstand, its hands frozen at 7 a.m. I had always been an early riser, embracing the quiet moments of dawn before the world began to stir. But today, the world would be different. My family had planned something special. I could feel it in the air. As I slipped out of bed, I could hear the faint hum of activity in the kitchen. The scent of coffee wafted through the house, wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. I padded softly to the kitchen, the coolness of the wooden floor sending a shiver up my spine. Emma was there, a flurry of motion, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, flour dusting her cheeks as she mixed something in a bowl. "Morning, Mom," she chirped, glancing up with a grin that lit up her face. I often thought that smile was a reflection of the sun itself, bright, warm, and full of life. "Morning, sweetheart. What are you making?" I asked, trying to suppress the urge to probe deeper. There was a certain energy in Emma today, an excitement laced with something else, something I couldn't quite place, a tension that made the hairs on my arms stand at attention. She turned back to the bowl, her hands moving quickly as she poured a stream of milk. "It's just a little birthday surprise," she said, her voice light but her eyes betraying a flicker of something unspoken. I noticed Jake, her husband, hovering at the doorway, arms crossed as he leaned against the frame, watching us with an unreadable expression. I felt a twinge of unease, but today was supposed to be about joy and celebration. I pushed the feeling aside, taking a deep breath as I stepped further into the warmth of the kitchen. "Can I help?" I offered, wanting to be part of whatever magic was unfolding. No, it's a surprise. You just relax," Emma insisted, her tone almost too insistent. I watched as she skillfully mixed the batter, her movements precise and practiced. There was a certain pleasure in watching her, a sense of nostalgia that tugged at my heart. I remembered the little girl who used to bake with me, her tiny hands covered in flour, laughter spilling out like the sweetest of melodies. But that laughter had grown quieter over the years, replaced by the weight of adulthood. I wanted to bridge the gap between us, to understand what my daughter was feeling, but there was always this barrier, a wall I felt I couldn't quite scale. "Okay, I'll just sit and enjoy my coffee then," I said, attempting to fill the space with lightness. I poured a cup, letting the rich aroma fill my senses, but as I took that first sip, a shadow of doubt flickered in my mind. I could feel it, the tension lacing through the air like a taut string. As Emma continued her preparations, I caught a fleeting look between her and Jake, the kind of glance that spoke volumes. It was quick, a mere second, but it felt heavy with implication, as if they were sharing a secret. My stomach tightened. I hadn't wanted to believe that there was a plan brewing behind my back, but the way they exchanged glances, the hushed tones that seemed to vanish as soon as I entered the room, sent a chill through me. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but it came out softer than I intended. "Of course, Mom, everything's perfect," Emma replied, too brightly, her smile faltering for just a moment before she returned to her mixing. I took another sip of my coffee, the warmth spreading through me, but it did little to quell the unease. I could sense the undercurrent of something more, an unspoken conversation that I wasn't a part of. I had spent my life believing that family was built on transparency, on open lines of communication, Yet here I was, standing in my own kitchen, feeling like a stranger. A few moments later, Emma turned to me, her face alight with excitement. "Okay, time to open your presents." The shift in her voice, the way her eyes sparkled, pulled me momentarily from my thoughts. I felt a rush of affection, the way you can't help but feel when your child is genuinely happy. "You didn't have to get me anything," I said, though my heart raced at the idea of unwrapping gifts, of being celebrated. "Oh, but we wanted to," she insisted, her hands clapping together. She rushed to the table where a small pile of wrapped boxes sat, each one adorned with bright paper and ribbons that danced in the light. "Okay, let's see what you've got for me," I said, my smile stretching wide as I approached the table. Emma watched eagerly, her excitement palpable. I picked up the first box, the lightness of it almost deceiving. I tore the wrapping, revealing a delicate necklace, silver with a single, beautiful stone that sparkled like the stars.
"Oh, Emma, it's beautiful," I gasped, holding it up to the light. "I thought it would remind you of all the good things in life," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I slipped it around my neck, feeling the cool metal against my skin. It felt like a hug, a reminder that my daughter was still here, still cared. But as I opened the next gift, a beautiful scarf, my heart sank. There was something in her eyes that hinted at a deeper layer to this celebration, a weight that I couldn't quite articulate. "Mom," Emma said as I finished unwrapping the last gift, a lovely picture frame, "I have one more thing to tell you." My stomach dropped, the familiar knot tightening. "What is it?" "I want you to know that Jake and I are here for you, always," she began, her expression earnest. "We've been talking, and we think it's time to make some changes." "Changes?" I echoed, feeling the warmth of the morning retreating, replaced by a chill that settled deep in my bones. "Yes," she said, her voice softening. "We think it might be a good idea to change the locks on the house." My heart raced. Change the locks? Why would we need to do that? Jake shifted uncomfortably at the doorway, his expression unreadable. "It's just, you've been forgetting things, and we want to keep you safe," Emma said, her tone shifting from excitement to something more serious, almost urgent. "Safe?" I echoed, the word hanging in the air like a heavy fog. "Safe from what?" "From yourself, Mom. We want to protect you. We don't want you to hurt yourself or get lost, or worse." The words cut deep, a sharp knife of truth that pierced through the fog of celebration. I felt my breath quicken, a flush creeping up my neck. "So you think I'm incapable?" "No, it's not like that," she pleaded, her eyes wide, but I could see the truth in them, the flicker of fear and concern that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. "You're treating me like I'm some kind of child." "No, Mom, please listen to me." Emma's voice rose slightly, desperation creeping in. "I am not a child, Emma. I am your mother, and I deserve to be treated with respect." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Jake pushed off the wall and stepped closer, his presence grounding but also adding to the weight of the moment. "Maggie, we just want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I scoffed, the bitterness thick in the air. "What's best for me is to live my life as I choose, not to be locked away like I'm some kind of prisoner." Emma's face fell, her expression a mixture of guilt and determination. "Mom, we're just trying to protect you from making mistakes. You've been talking about moving out before, about how you don't know if you can stay in this house. We think a fresh start might be good for you." "Is that what this is about? You think I need a fresh start?" My voice quaked. the tension stretching between us like a taut string ready to snap. "It's about safety, Mom. You can't be alone all the time. You could fall or forget to take your medication." The truth of her words struck me, a reminder of my own vulnerabilities. It was like a cold wave crashing over my warm birthday morning, washing away the light. I knew she was worried, but the way she was going about it felt heavy-handed, suffocating. "I don't need you to protect me," I said, my voice trembling. "I need you to trust me." Emma opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked at Jake, who stepped back, as if sensing the need for space. I turned away, facing the window, the sunlight streaming in as if mocking our confrontation. The world outside was alive, birds flitting from tree to tree, oblivious to the turmoil inside my heart. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, and I fought back the tears that threatened to spill over. "Maybe I should just go for a walk," I murmured, needing to escape, to breathe, to find clarity in the chaos. "Mom, please?" Emma's voice trailed off, filled with so many unsaid things. I could sense her worry, but right now it felt suffocating. I grabbed my jacket and slipped out the door, the chill of the morning air hitting me like a slap. I needed space, a moment to gather my thoughts, to understand the depths of this confrontation. As I walked down the familiar path that led to the park, I could still feel the weight of their words hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. How had we arrived at this moment? My mind raced, the complexities of love and independence swirling around me. I had always believed that true freedom came at the cost of painful truths, but this felt like a different kind of prison. I sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree, the leaves whispering secrets in the wind. My heart ached, torn between the love I felt for Emma and the desire for my own autonomy. I could see the love in her eyes, but I could also see the fear of losing me, of watching me fail. But what about my fear? The fear of being trapped, of being seen as less than I was? I had spent so long carving out my own life, my own identity, and now it felt like it was all slipping through my fingers. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath as I listened to the sounds of the park, the laughter of children, the rustle of leaves, the distant barking of dogs. But beneath it all, I felt a growing sense of urgency, a need to confront the truth of our situation. As the minutes ticked by, I became acutely aware that the world was moving on without me. The clock was ticking, and with it, the realization that I couldn't keep running from this confrontation. I had to face Emma, to understand her fears and to help her understand my own. With my heart pounding, I stood up, determination coursing through my veins. I had to find the courage to confront the truth, to navigate the complexities of our love, and to seek a resolution that would allow both of us to breathe freely again. As I made my way back home, I felt the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. I knew the conversation ahead would be difficult, but I also knew that we both needed it. We needed to find a way to bridge the gap between love and independence, to redefine what freedom meant for both of us. When I opened the door, the house felt different, charged with an energy that crackled in the air. I could hear Emma's voice from the kitchen, low and soft, and I felt a pang of longing mixed with fear. But as I took a deep breath and stepped inside, I knew I was ready to face whatever came next, ready to confront the truth that lay ahead, even if it meant grappling with the painful realities of our lives. I found Emma standing at the counter, her back to me, and I could see that she was still processing, still caught in the web of our earlier conversation. "Emma," I began, my voice steady but laced with vulnerability, Slowly, she turned to me, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "I think we need to talk." And as I said those words, I felt the weight of our unspoken truths hovering in the air, ready to burst forth, ready to lead us both into the unknown.
The sun was dipping low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over my backyard as I surveyed the scene. My birthday celebration, a small gathering of family and a few close friends, had unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Laughter floated in the air, mingling with the scent of grilled vegetables and the sweet notes of a chocolate cake that Emma had insisted on baking herself. I felt a surge of love for my daughter, a feeling that made my chest swell and pulse. Yet, beneath that warmth, an unsettling itch crawled along my spine, an instinctive warning I couldn't quite decipher. "Mom, can you help me with the drinks?" Emma asked, her eyes bright with excitement as she motioned toward the cooler filled with ice and soda. I nodded, grateful for a moment's distraction from the laughter that felt almost too loud, too cheerful. As I followed her into the kitchen, the door swung shut behind us, cutting off the laughter like a blade. "Do you need anything else?" I asked, reaching for the soda cans, my fingers brushing against the cool metal. My heart was racing, but I chalked it up to the excitement of the day. "No, just 1 second," she murmured, her gaze darting to the living room where Jake was standing, his arms crossed, a subtle tension etched into his jawline. I watched as Emma's lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. There was a conspiratorial air to her tone, a whisper that felt misplaced amidst the joyous atmosphere. "Everything okay?" I asked, my brow furrowing. Yeah, just let me grab some napkins," she replied, her smile a little too bright, her voice a touch too high. The way she avoided my gaze sent a jolt of unease through me, like stepping on a cold floor barefoot in the winter. As she turned to fetch the napkins, I caught sight of Jake slipping out of the room. My heart sunk. What were they planning? I had always prided myself on being an independent woman, the kind who could handle her own affairs, who had built a life from the ground up despite the obstacles. At 55, I still believed that freedom was a prize worth fighting for. But now I felt the weight of something looming, something dark and unnameable. When Emma returned, she handed me a stack of napkins, her fingers brushing against mine. It was a small gesture, but I felt the tension in her grip. Something was off, and it gnawed at my insides like a persistent ache. I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, like a thin shell waiting to crack. "You've grown up so much, Emma. I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Mom," she said. And her voice was soft, almost wistful. I could see her struggling with something behind her eyes, a battle that had her caught between her protective instincts and her own desires. The party continued, but I felt like a ghost drifting around the edges, watching without really being present. Conversations flowed, and I joined in where I could, laughing and sharing stories, but my mind kept wandering back to that whisper. Moments later, Emma was at my side again, her tone light, but I noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly as she poured me a glass of wine. It was a gesture I had grown accustomed to over the years, but now it felt like a signal, an unspoken invitation to uncover what lay beneath her surface. "Let's step outside for a moment," I suggested, hoping the fresh air would clear the thick fog of unease settling in the room. Emma nodded, her eyes wide, almost startled, and together we stepped onto the patio. The evening air was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of the house. I leaned against the railing, savoring the momentary peace while glancing at Emma, who stood a few feet away, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "What's going on, Emma?" I asked, my voice low and steady, but it felt like a challenge. "You've been acting strange all day." She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the ground. I could see the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her, the way her shoulders sagged under the burden. "Mom, I'm worried about you," she finally admitted, the words slipping out like secrets whispered late at night.
Worried? Why? I felt a sharp pang in my chest, a mix of confusion and anger. I'm fine. I've always been fine. Are you? You say that, but I see how you struggle to keep everything together. Her voice trembled slightly, and I caught the faintest quiver in her lips. I want you to be safe, and I want you to be happy. Happy? What does that mean? I shot back, the heat rising in my cheeks. You think changing the locks will make me happy?
Mom, please, just... She took a deep breath, and I could see the fight in her eyes, the protective daughter battling against the independence she had always admired in me. I just want to keep you safe. You've been through so much, and I don't know how to help you without what? Without taking away my freedom? The words burst from me, sharp and raw, echoing in the quiet of the night. I felt the weight of my own vulnerability crashing down, the unspoken truths I had buried beneath layers of autonomy. No, Mom, I don't want to take anything away. I just want you to be okay. Her voice softened, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who would cry when she thought I was upset, the one who believed she could fix everything with a hug. I'm scared of what might happen if you keep trying to do it all on your own. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain that true freedom often came at the cost of painful truths, that my struggles, my autonomy, were intertwined with my identity? The very essence of who I was felt like a fragile thread, fraying at the edges. I've always been independent, Emma. I built this life. I don't want to feel trapped. My voice cracked, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. But I don't want to lose you either. Then let me help you. Her eyes were pleading, and I could see the raw emotion flickering beneath the surface. I'm not trying to control you. I just want to protect you. The silence hung thick between us, and I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on my chest. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap that had formed between us, but the space felt infinite, filled with uncertainty and fears I had never dared to voice. As I looked at her, I realized that this moment was a crossroads, a fragile point where love and vulnerability intertwined. I felt my heart race, the tension in the air charged with possibility. I could either confront the truths we both feared or retreat into the safety of silence. But before I could decide, I heard the faint sound of a key turning in the lock, an ominous click that shattered the evening tranquility. Emma's eyes flicked toward the house, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Mom, I think... But it was too late. Jake stepped through the door, his expression unreadable, and for a heartbeat, the world fell silent. I could sense the storm brewing, the collision of love and independence ready to erupt, but I didn't know how to prepare for it. Emma, he said, his voice steady but urgent, we need to talk. And as the weight of his words settled in the air, I felt a flicker of dread. The truth was coming, and I could only pray it wouldn't shatter us in the process. The kitchen was a whirl of color and sound, the scent of vanilla and butter wafting through the air as I stood at the center of my birthday celebration. Balloons swayed gently from the ceiling, casting playful shadows on the walls, while laughter erupted like popcorn in the microwave, each pop a reminder of the joy I was supposed to feel. I forced a smile, even as my heart thudded in my chest, the rhythm of it echoing a dissonance that only I could hear. Emma flitted about, her dark hair falling in waves down her back, a vibrant contrast to the pastel decorations she had chosen. She had always had an eye for aesthetics, a knack for turning the simplest of moments into something extraordinary. I admired that about her, how she could infuse life into a dull room. But today, there was something more, something in her eyes that glinted like glass, sharp and fragile at once. It was the kind of look that made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, the ground beneath me threatening to crumble. "Mom, can you believe I found that cake?" she exclaimed, her voice a cheerful lilt that echoed off the walls. I turned to see her holding up a slice of chocolate cake, the icing glistening like a promise. It was my favorite, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of gratitude for her effort. I had to go to 3 places to track it down. I chuckled, trying to drown out the gnawing sensation in my stomach. "I know you're not that picky," though my heart tightened at the thought of how hard she had worked to make this day special for me. It was as if she was trying to cover something with frosting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a layer of bitterness beneath. As the afternoon wore on, I felt the warmth of my friends and family surrounding me, their faces painted with smiles, but I couldn't shake the chill that crept up my spine. I caught Jake, Emma's husband, stealing glances at her every now and then, a frown tugging at the corners of his lips. He was supportive, always the pragmatic one, but something about the way he stood with his arms crossed made me uneasy. It was as if he was guarding a secret, one that I wasn't meant to discover. The laughter rang hollow, and I found myself retreating to the corner of the room where the sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden hue over everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to ground myself in the warmth of the sun. Perhaps I was overthinking things. Perhaps the tension I felt was just a figment of my imagination. But then I caught sight of Emma and Jake whispering together, their heads bowed close, their expressions serious. A knot twisted in my stomach, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Mom, are you okay?" Emma's voice broke through my thoughts, and I blinked, her concern evident as she approached me. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine, sweetheart," I replied, though my tone lacked conviction. "Just a little overwhelmed, I guess." "Let's take a picture," she said, her enthusiasm bubbling over, but the way she clutched my arm felt too tight, as if she were trying to keep me tethered while she prepared to let go. I forced a smile, positioning myself between her and Jake, their faces glowing with the kind of joy that felt foreign to me. The camera clicked, the moment frozen in time, but the air crackled with the unspoken words that lingered between us like a storm cloud. As the evening approached, the atmosphere shifted. Emma's laughter had lost its luster, replaced with a tightness that mirrored my own unease. I watched her move about the room, her body language revealing a deeper struggle hidden beneath her cheerful facade. Her shoulders were tense, her hands fidgeting as she poured drinks for the guests. I felt the weight of my own vulnerabilities pressing down on me, forcing me to confront a truth I had long avoided. "Mom, can I talk to you for a minute?" Emma's voice cut through the chatter, and I could see her hesitance, the way her fingers dug into the fabric of her dress. My heart raced as I nodded, the small room suddenly feeling like a cage. I followed her outside, the cool evening air brushing against my skin, offering a brief reprieve from the warmth that had felt stifling moments before. "What's going on, Emma?" I asked, my voice soft, yet the edge of worry crept in. "You've been acting strange all day." So took a deep breath, her gaze darting to the ground, a familiar gesture that had always signaled her unease. It was a sign that she was wrestling with something heavy, something that had built up inside her until it threatened to spill over. "I've been talking to Jake," she finally blurted, her voice trembling slightly. "About you." "About me?" The air felt thick, the question hanging between us like a fragile balloon, ready to pop. "What do you mean?" "Mom, it's just that we're worried about you," she confessed, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You're alone a lot, and I don't think it's healthy. We want to help you." A sharp breath caught in my throat, the truth of her words striking me like lightning. "Help me? By what? Changing the locks?" "Mom," she exclaimed, her voice rising, "it's not like that. I just want you to be safe." "Safe?" The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "You think I'm not capable of taking care of myself?" "It's not that," she pleaded, stepping closer, her hands reaching for mine. "It's just, I want to create a safe environment for you. I want you to be happy." The irony of her statement twisted inside me like a knife. She thought she was creating safety, but all I felt was a tightening grip on my independence. I wanted to scream, to tell her that true freedom often came at the cost of painful truths. But instead, I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, a rush of vulnerability flooding my senses. "Emma, I appreciate your concern, but I need you to understand something. I am trying to navigate this life on my own. I need to make my own choices, even if they're not what you would choose for me." She opened her mouth to respond, but then closed it again, her expression shifting as if grappling with the weight of my words. I could see the conflict swirling in her eyes, the desire to protect clashing with the need to respect my autonomy. It was a delicate dance, one that had grown more complicated over the years. "I just want what's best for you," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I know you do," I replied, my heart aching, "but you can't dictate what that looks like for me. You have to let me be the person I need to be, even if it scares you." For a moment, we stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken truths and unresolved tensions. I could feel the weight of the world shifting around us, the delicate balance of our relationship hanging by a thread. It was both terrifying and liberating, this realization that we were each other's anchors in a storm, yet also the source of our deepest fears. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard, I sensed the shift in our dynamic. We were teetering on the edge of something profound, a confrontation that could either shatter the fragile bond we had or strengthen it in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. "Mom," said Emma softly, her voice trembling, "I just want to protect you. I can't bear the thought of losing you." And in that moment, I realized how much we were both struggling for our independence, how love could be both a shield and a cage. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat as I felt the ground shift beneath us, the realization of what was to come looming ahead like an uncharted territory. The air buzzed with uncertainty, each heartbeat echoing the question that hung between us. How far were we willing to go to protect the ones we loved? I took a deep breath, preparing to confront the abyss that lay ahead, the truth ready to spill out like the last drops of a fading sunset. What would we uncover in the depths of our vulnerability? What painful truths awaited us beneath the surface of our love?
The sun was dipping low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over my backyard as I surveyed the scene. My birthday celebration, a small gathering of family and a few close friends, had unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Laughter floated in the air, mingling with the scent of grilled vegetables and the sweet notes of a chocolate cake that Emma had insisted on baking herself. I felt a surge of love for my daughter, a feeling that made my chest swell and pulse. Yet, beneath that warmth, an unsettling itch crawled along my spine, an instinctive warning I couldn't quite decipher. "Mom, can you help me with the drinks?" Emma asked, her eyes bright with excitement as she motioned toward the cooler filled with ice and soda. I nodded, grateful for a moment's distraction from the laughter that felt almost too loud, too cheerful. As I followed her into the kitchen, the door swung shut behind us, cutting off the laughter like a blade. "Do you need anything else?" I asked, reaching for the soda cans, my fingers brushing against the cool metal. My heart was racing, but I chalked it up to the excitement of the day. "No, just 1 second," she murmured, her gaze darting to the living room where Jake was standing, his arms crossed, a subtle tension etched into his jawline. I watched as Emma's lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. There was a conspiratorial air to her tone, a whisper that felt misplaced amidst the joyous atmosphere. "Everything okay?" I asked, my brow furrowing. Yeah, just, let me grab some napkins," she replied, her smile a little too bright, her voice a touch too high. The way she avoided my gaze sent a jolt of unease through me, like stepping on a cold floor barefoot in the winter. As she turned to fetch the napkins, I caught sight of Jake slipping out of the room. My heart sank. What were they planning? I had always prided myself on being an independent woman, the kind who could handle her own affairs, who had built a life from the ground up despite the obstacles. At 55, I still believed that freedom was a prize worth fighting for. But now, I felt the weight of something looming, something dark and unnameable. When Emma returned, she handed me a stack of napkins, her fingers brushing against mine. It was a small gesture, but I felt the tension in her grip. Something was off, and it gnawed at my insides like a persistent ache. I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, like a thin shell waiting to crack.
You've grown up so much, Emma. I'm proud of you.
Thanks, Mom, she said, and her voice was soft, almost wistful. I could see her struggling with something behind her eyes, a battle that had her caught between her protective instincts and her own desires. The party continued, but I felt like a ghost drifting around the edges, watching without really being present. Conversations flowed, and I joined in where I could, laughing and sharing stories, but my mind kept wandering back to that whisper. Moments later, Emma was at my side again, her tone light, but I noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly as she poured me a glass of wine. It was a gesture I had grown accustomed to over the years, but now it felt like a signal, an unspoken invitation to uncover what lay beneath her surface. Let's step outside for a moment, I suggested, hoping the fresh air would clear the thick fog of unease settling in the room. Emma nodded, her eyes wide, almost startled, and together we stepped onto the patio. The evening air was cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of the house. I leaned against the railing, savoring the momentary peace, while glancing at Emma, who stood a few feet away, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. I asked, "What's going on, Emma?" My voice was low and steady, but it felt like a challenge. "You've been acting strange all day." She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the ground. I could see the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her, the way her shoulders sagged under the burden. "Mom, I'm worried about you," she finally admitted, the words slipping out like secrets whispered late at night. "Worried? Why?" I felt a sharp pang in my chest, a mix of confusion and anger. "I'm fine. I've always been fine." "Forgetful." The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. I felt my heart accelerate, a wild bird trapped in a cage. My thoughts whirled, and the metaphor of my life flashed before me, an intricate tapestry woven with threads of independence and vulnerability, now threatening to unravel before my eyes. "Emma, I'm fine. I don't need anyone to protect me. I can take care of myself." "But can you really?" she countered, her voice tinged with desperation. "You're not the same, Mom. You forget things, and it scares me. I can't just sit back and watch you struggle. I need to know you're safe." Her words sliced through me, the truth of them a bitter pill to swallow. I felt my throat tighten, the wave of emotions crashing over me. Fear, anger, sadness, confusion. I had always prided myself on my independence, my ability to navigate life's challenges alone. But now, standing in the fading light, I felt that independence waver like a flame in the wind. "Emma, please don't do this," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "I know you want to protect me, but this isn't the answer. You're treating me like I'm incapable, and I refuse to accept that." Her expression shifted, a mix of regret and determination dancing across her features. "I'm just trying to help you, Mom. I love you, but I also need to know that you're okay." The truth of her love hung between us, a fragile bridge spanning the growing chasm of our understanding. It was a love that felt like a double-edged sword, both protective and suffocating. I could see the ambition in her eyes, the desire to carve out a safe space for both of us, but at what cost? As the cool night air wrapped around us, I felt the weight of my own vulnerabilities, the painful recognition of how quickly independence could slip through my fingers like sand. I took a step back, trying to create distance, to find clarity in the chaos swirling around us. "Emma, I need you to listen to me. I'm still your mother, and I need you to trust me. I'm not asking for much, just a little respect for my choices." But in that moment, I could see the wall rising between us,
a barrier built from love and fear. The complexities of familial bonds now laid bare. The world around us faded, leaving only the two of us, caught in a struggle for understanding, a tug-of-war of love and autonomy. As the darkness settled, I could feel the weight of the unspoken truths lingering in the air, a storm waiting to break. And I knew that this conversation was only the beginning, the first crack in the facade of our relationship, the prelude to a confrontation that would change everything. Emma's eyes searched mine, a plea for connection, and I found myself at a crossroads, uncertain of the path that lay ahead.
The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue across the living room, where laughter mingled with the aroma of vanilla cake and fresh coffee. It was my birthday, a milestone I had once anticipated with excitement, but now approached with a sense of trepidation. I leaned back in my chair, my hands curled around a delicate porcelain cup, the floral pattern a stark contrast to the tightening sensation in my chest. I could hear the familiar banter of friends and family, but an undercurrent of tension threaded through their voices, a subtle dissonance that only I seemed to notice. Emma was in the kitchen, her voice rising above the clinking of dishes as she chatted with Jake, her husband. I caught snippets of their conversation, something about the locks, a phrase that sent a chill down my spine. I could see her gesturing animatedly, her hands slicing through the air like she was trying to dissect a problem that seemed to loom larger than life. I felt a twinge of unease, a knot forming in my stomach as the laughter around me faded into a dull hum, the warmth of the room dissipating, leaving me feeling exposed. "Mom, can you come help me with this?" Emma called, her tone bright but edged with something I couldn't quite place. I set my cup down with a soft clink and made my way to the kitchen, each step heavy with anticipation. As I crossed the threshold, I noticed Jake watching us with an intensity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. It was as if he were an actor in a play I had not agreed to see, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "Sure, what do you need?" I asked, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask than an expression of joy. Emma was busy arranging plates on the counter, her movements precise but hurried, as if she were racing against time. My heart thudded in my chest, the rhythm quickening as I observed her. There was something in her eyes, a flicker of resolve that sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I had always prided myself on my perceptiveness, honing it over the years like a blade, but this moment felt like a fog settling in, obscuring the truth. "Just help me with the cake, Mom," she said, her voice bright but strained. "I want to make sure everyone gets a piece. It's your special day after all." My stomach twisted. There was a disconnect between her words and the energy in the room, a subtle dance of shadows that made me feel as if I were on the brink of something I couldn't quite grasp. I moved closer to the counter, reaching for the knife to slice into the cake, but my hands trembled ever so slightly. Emma's gaze darted to Jake, and I caught the faintest flicker of something in their exchange, a shared secret perhaps, or a plan that I was not privy to. The cake was rich and sweet, the frosting soft and inviting, yet it felt like a mask over the truth lurking beneath. I felt like a ship caught in a storm, the waves crashing around me while I clung to the mast, desperate for stability. As I served slices to the guests, I could feel Emma's eyes on me, a weight of expectation that pressed against my chest. It was as if she were waiting for me to unravel, for the threads of my autonomy to fray in her presence. "Everything okay, Mom?" she asked, her voice careful balance of concern and something else. Was it guilt? I paused, the knife hovering over the plate, and looked at her. "Is everything okay with you, Emma?" I countered, my voice steadier than I felt. "You seem distracted." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment I thought I saw her mask slip, the facade of the perfect daughter,
the one who wanted only to celebrate my life, wavered like a candle flickering in a draft. "I'm fine, Mom. Just a lot on my mind," she said. "On your mind or on your heart?" I asked, the words spilling out before I could stop them. The room grew quiet, the laughter fading into a backdrop of uncertainty. I could see the flush creeping up her cheeks, her hands fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. It was a gesture I recognized all too well, a sign of her discomfort, and it sent a jolt of empathy through me. My heart ached for her, for the burden I sensed she was carrying. I had always wanted to protect her, to shield her from the harsh realities of life, but now it felt as though the roles had reversed. "Mom, I just want what's best for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to be safe." "Safe?" I echoed, a bitter taste rising in my throat. "From what? I've lived on my own for years, Emma. I'm not some fragile piece of glass." My words were sharp, but beneath the surface I felt the cracks forming. I was vulnerable, caught between the desire for autonomy and the fear that my daughter saw me as someone who needed saving. "Just let me handle this, okay?" she replied, her tone taking on an edge that sent a tremor through me. "I'm trying to create a safe environment for you. You don't get it." "No, I don't," I shot back, the heat of frustration rising in my chest. "What are you talking about? What's really going on here?" The tension in the room thickened, a palpable silence enveloping us. I could feel Jake's gaze, a silent question hanging in the air, urging us to address the unspoken. Emma's lips pressed together, her eyes darkening with a mix of defiance and sorrow. I felt my pulse quicken, a drumbeat of anxiety echoing in my ears. "Mom," she began, her voice trembling. Just what?" I interrupted, my own voice rising, the words tumbling out in a rush, fueled by a mix of fear and anger. "Just admit that you're trying to control my life? To lock me away in some safe haven because you think I can't take care of myself?"
The truth hung heavy in the air, and I could see her struggle to find the words, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. I had never intended for this confrontation to spiral into such a heated exchange, but the weight of unspoken fears pressed against us like a heavy fog. The cake, once a symbol of celebration, now felt like a reminder of the distance that had grown between us. "Maybe I'm just trying to protect you from the world, from the things I can't control," Emma finally admitted, her voice cracking. "You don't know what I've seen, what I've heard. It terrifies me, Mom. The thought of losing you?" Tears welled in her eyes, and suddenly, I saw her not just as my daughter, but as a young woman wrestling with her own vulnerabilities. I felt the walls I had built around my heart begin to fracture, the realization hitting me like a wave. In wanting to protect her, I had failed to see that she needed to protect me too, in her own way. I took a step closer, the space between us filled with the tension of unexpressed love and fear. "Emma, please, I know you want to keep me safe, but I need to know that you trust me to make my own choices." "But what if those choices put you in danger?" she pleaded, her voice trembling. "Life is dangerous, sweetheart," I said softly, my heart aching for us both. "But true freedom often comes at the cost of painful truths, and sometimes we have to accept that vulnerability is part of living." For a moment, we stood there, the weight of our confrontation hanging between us like a fragile thread. I wanted to reach out, to pull her into an embrace and shield her from the storm brewing in her heart. But I also wanted to hold my ground, to assert my independence as a woman who had weathered many storms. As I looked into her eyes, I saw the flicker of understanding begin to take root, but the path to resolution was still shrouded in uncertainty. I could feel the ground shifting beneath us, the delicate balance of our relationship teetering on the edge of a precipice. "Maybe we both need to rethink what safety looks like," I said quietly, the words hanging in the air like a promise. Emma nodded slowly, her expression softening, but I could see the tension still coiling in her shoulders.
The storm was not yet over, and as the laughter from the living room faded into a distant echo, I knew we had only just begun to navigate the complexities of love, both the protective and the liberating kind. The doorbell rang, a sharp intrusion that sliced through the fragile moment, and I could feel the tension snap like a taut string. Emma glanced at Jake, who offered a reassuring smile, but I could sense the weight of unspoken words still lingering between us. As Emma turned to answer the door, I braced myself for what was to come, my heart pounding with the uncertainty of our journey ahead. Would we find our way back to each other, or would our fears continue to build walls that would keep us apart? The answer remained just out of reach, like a whisper lost in the wind, leaving me suspended in a moment of anticipation, both anxious and hopeful for what lay ahead. I woke up that morning to the soft, golden light of a September sun filtering through my bedroom curtains. It was my birthday, a day that, in past years, had been filled with laughter and the sweet scent of cake. But today, the air felt thick with something unspoken, a tension that wrapped around me like a damp blanket. I stretched, feeling the familiar creaks of my joints, a reminder that time, ever relentless, was slipping through my fingers like sand. I pushed aside the unease, determined to embrace the day, yet a whisper of dread lingered in the back of my mind. Downstairs, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the open space of our cozy kitchen. I found Emma arranging a bouquet of wildflowers on the table, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up as I entered, her face breaking into a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Happy birthday, Mom," she exclaimed, her voice a little too bright, too rehearsed. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, wrapping my arms around her, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with a hint of the flowers. I held her a moment longer, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, but a flicker of something foreign, an urgency perhaps, passed between us. It was subtle, like the fleeting shadow of a bird overhead, but it made my heart race. Jake appeared too, offering me a warm hug and a kiss on the cheek. "Happy birthday, Maggie! We've got a whole day planned for you," he said with a grin that was both comforting and unsettling. I could see the excitement in his eyes, but also the undertow of something more serious lurking beneath the surface. As we settled into breakfast, laughter floated around the table. Emma kept stealing glances at Jake, and I noticed the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her napkin, folding and unfolding it as though it were an anchor in turbulent waters. "What's on the agenda today?" I asked, trying to steer the conversation away from the tension that seemed to weave itself into our interactions. "Just some fun surprises," Emma replied, her voice a touch too high, like an unfamiliar note in a well-loved song. "But first, I thought we could take a walk at the park. It's a beautiful day, and I wanted to show you the new art installations." I nodded, sensing the excitement bubbling beneath her words, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that she wasn't telling me something. After breakfast, we donned light jackets and headed out, the sun shining brightly, but casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the horizon, as if hinting at secrets yet to be revealed. The park was alive with the laughter of children and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Emma walked beside me, her arm casually linked with mine, but I could feel the tension radiating from her. Each step felt heavy, weighted with invisible burdens. As we strolled, I watched couples and families, the ease of their interactions starkly contrasting with the unease that enveloped us. I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about work, about her plans for the future, but her responses were clipped, her eyes darting away from mine as if she were avoiding a confrontation. We finally reached a secluded corner of the park where the art installations stood, a mix of whimsical sculptures and thought-provoking pieces. I admired them, appreciating the creativity and the stories they told, but my heart was not in it. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Emma was preoccupied with something far more significant than the art around us. As we turned to head back, I caught sight of Jake leaning against a tree, arms folded, his expression unreadable. The sight of him sent a jolt through me. Why was he standing there, away from us? My instincts began to flare. "Emma, why don't you go talk to Jake for a moment? I'll take a look at that sculpture over there," I suggested, trying to give her an opportunity to breathe. She hesitated, a flicker of fear crossing her features, before she nodded and walked over to him. I watched them, my heart pounding in my chest, each beat echoing the growing sense of foreboding. I could see them whispering, Jake's brow furrowed as he gestured toward me. The way Emma's eyes darted back at me sent a chill through my spine. Something was wrong, and I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet.
I turned away, trying to breathe deeply, but the air felt thick and suffocating. My stomach twisted into knots, and I felt the familiar ache of vulnerability creeping in. I was losing control, and the realization was as sharp as the edge of a broken glass. I had always prided myself on being a pillar of strength, but now I felt like a leaf caught in a storm, tossed and turned by winds I couldn't see. As they approached, I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, like a facade ready to shatter. "What were you two talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, just some birthday surprises," Emma replied, her smile faltering for a brief moment before she recovered. But I could see the shadows lurking behind her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "Let's head back," Jake suggested, his voice calm but edged with an urgency that made me more anxious. The walk back felt longer, the silence stretching between us like a taut string ready to snap. Once we were home, I felt a surge of determination. I needed to confront whatever it was they were hiding. My heart raced as I set the stage, gathering the courage to peel back the layers of their secret. "Emma, can we talk?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of panic. "Sure, Mom, what's on your mind?" I motioned toward the living room, the air heavy with unspoken words. As we sat down, I could see the way her fingers twisted together, the way her breath hitched slightly. "What's going on?" "I feel like there's something you're not telling me," I said, my voice steady but laced with an urgency that belied my calm demeanor. Emma glanced at Jake, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Mom, we just want to make sure you're safe," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "There are things happening, and we're worried about you living alone." "Things? What things, Emma?" I pressed, feeling my heart hammering against my ribcage. Jake shifted in his seat, and his expression grew serious. "There's been some talk in the neighborhood, Maggie. Break-ins and other incidents. We thought it would be best to change the locks, maybe install a security system." I felt a rush of emotions, fear, anger, confusion, all swirling within me. "So that's it? You just decided to take over my life without even asking me?" "It's not like that, Mom," Emma pleaded, her voice rising slightly. "I want you to be safe. I can't bear the thought of something happening to you. By making decisions for me? By treating me like I am incapable?" I shot back, my words sharper than I intended. The room fell silent, tension crackling like static in the air. I could see the hurt in her eyes, and it twisted my heart. I had always tried to be open, to foster independence in her, but now here we were, on opposite sides of an invisible chasm. "Emma, I appreciate your concern, but you need to trust that I can take care of myself. True freedom often comes at the cost of painful truths, and I need to confront mine." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment we were suspended in that space, both of us grappling with our vulnerabilities. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between us, but the chasm felt insurmountable. As the weight of the moment pressed down on us, I could sense that this confrontation was only the beginning. There were layers to our love, complexities I had never fully acknowledged. And as I looked into Emma's eyes, I realized that the truth of our relationship was about to unravel in ways I never anticipated. Just then, the doorbell rang, a sharp sound that shattered the tension in the air. Emma's gaze flickered toward the door, and I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "I'll get it," she said, rising from her seat. As she walked away, I felt the ground shift beneath me once more. We were standing at the edge of a precipice, and I could sense that nothing would be the same after today. The sun slanted through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the table adorned with a modest birthday cake, its frosting slightly lopsided but adorned with candles that flickered like tiny flames of hope. I sat there, surrounded by the familiar chaos of my daughter Emma's life, her vibrant energy spilling into every corner of my modest home. The scent of vanilla wafted through the air as I took a moment to soak it all in. The laughter, the warmth, and the sweet, syrupy nostalgia of birthdays past. Yet, beneath the surface of this seemingly joyous occasion, a tension brewed, a palpable undercurrent that sent a shiver down my spine. "Happy birthday, Mom!" Emma exclaimed, her smile wide, but her eyes darted nervously towards Jake, her husband, who stood just outside the kitchen door, his expression unreadable. I noticed the way her fingers danced over the tablecloth, a nervous habit she'd had since she was a child. It was as if she were trying to smooth out the wrinkles of her own anxieties, the fabric of our lives gathering in uncertain folds. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, my voice lighter than the heaviness in my heart. "This is lovely." I reached for her hand, warmth radiating from her skin, and my heart swelled. I wanted to bask in this moment, to forget the whispers I had caught earlier, the hushed tones that felt like daggers to my independence. "I'll just go check on the drinks," Emma said suddenly, her eyes flicking again towards Jake, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I watched her retreat, a tightness settling in my chest as I sensed something looming, a truth hiding in the shadows like a caged bird, desperate to escape. "Hey, Maggie," Jake said, stepping into the kitchen, his demeanor casual but with an edge of urgency that made my stomach twist. "Just fine, Jake. It's a good day," I replied, my voice tinged with a hint of forced cheerfulness. I could feel the weight of his gaze, a mix of concern and something else. Perhaps guilt? I couldn't quite place it, but it made my skin crawl. "Listen, Maggie, I know Emma worries about you," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "She just wants what's best for you." I nodded, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "I know she does, but I'm not a child anymore. I can take care of myself." His expression hardened, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of something. Was it frustration? "It's not that simple, Maggie." I swallowed hard, feeling the lump in my throat grow as I tried to comprehend his words, the implications hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. I had spent my entire life carving out my independence, and yet here I was, feeling like a child again, caught in the web of my daughter's well-meaning intentions. Emma returned with a tray of drinks, the clatter of glasses breaking the tension. "What were you two talking about?" she asked, her tone bright but her eyes narrowing slightly as she scanned our faces. The unspoken question hung in the air, the invisible thread straining between us. "Just catching up," I said, trying to deflect, but Emma's gaze bore into me, searching for truths I wasn't ready to share. As we settled back into the celebratory atmosphere, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The laughter felt forced, the smiles strained. I could see Emma's shoulders tightening, the way her fingers curled around her glass, knuckles paling as if she were bracing for an impact. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls whispering secrets I was not privy to. "Mom, can we talk?" Emma's voice cut through the laughter, a sudden seriousness that sent a shiver down my spine. The room quieted, the atmosphere shifting, like a tide changing course. "Of course, sweetheart. Is something wrong?" I asked, my heart racing.
the beat echoing in my ears. The way she hesitated sent my mind spiraling.
"I think we need to discuss your living situation," she said, her gaze dropping to the table, avoiding my eyes. "Jake and I have been talking, and we feel like maybe it's time for a change." I felt my breath hitch, a wave of indignation rising within me. "A change? What do you mean?" Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she spoke, the words tumbling out with a mix of urgency and fear. "We want to make sure you're safe, Mom, that you're not alone. I worry about you." I chuckled, a bitter sound that echoed in the silence. "Safe? Emma, I'm fine. I've lived on my own for years. I don't need anyone to take care of me." Her eyes flickered, a storm of emotions swirling in their depths. "But you're not fine, are you? You're struggling. I see it." I opened my mouth to protest, but the truth of her words lodged in my throat. I felt it then, the weight of my solitude, the creeping dread of aging alone. Had I been so blind to my own vulnerabilities? In my attempt to assert my independence, had I unwittingly built walls that were now crumbling around me? "Emma, She started, but she cut me off, her voice trembling with urgency. "Mom, please, just let me help you. I want us to be a family, but you have to meet me halfway. I can't just stand by and watch you." "Watch me what?" I shot back, the heat of anger rising within me. "Watch me live my life? Watch me make my own choices?" Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and in that moment I saw the fierce love that fueled her actions, the ambition to protect me while fighting her own demons. "It's not that simple, Mom. I'm scared. I'm scared of losing you." A silence fell between us, heavy and laden with unspoken truths. I could feel the pulse of vulnerability in the air, the rawness of our shared fears. "I'm scared too," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Emma stepped closer, her hand reaching out tentatively, fingers brushing against mine. "Then let's face it together." I took a deep breath, the weight of my pride suddenly feeling like a heavy cloak I was ready to shed. "Together," I echoed, though doubt gnawed at the edges of my resolve. But just then, I caught a glimpse of Jake, lingering in the doorway, his posture tense, hand fidgeting with the keys in his pocket. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Were they really here to help me, or was this a ploy to take away my autonomy? The air thickened with uncertainty, and I wrestled with the fear that my independence, my very essence, was at stake. "Wait, Emma," I said, my heart racing as I tried to grasp the threads of our conversation. "What are you planning to do?" "I just want to make sure you're safe," she said again, determination mingling with desperation. "I'll distract her. Go change the locks." The words echoed in my mind, a chilling reminder of the unspoken intentions lurking beneath the surface. As I stared into her eyes, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me, a mix of love, fear, and an aching desire for understanding. I realized then that true freedom often comes at the cost of painful truths that could fracture the delicate balance of our relationship or forge a new path forward. The tension between us crackled like electricity, and I knew we stood on the precipice of something significant, something that could change everything we thought we understood about each other. "Mom, please," Emma urged, her voice trembling. "Let's figure this out." I looked between her and Jake, the enormity of the moment crashing over me like a tidal wave. But could I face the truth of my vulnerabilities? Could I allow them to see the cracks that ran through my carefully constructed facade? With a deep breath, I felt the boundaries of my world shifting, the ground beneath me unsteady. Maybe it was time to confront the fears that had held me captive for so long.
to face the complexities of familial love and the struggle for independence. But as I opened my mouth to speak, a sudden realization gripped me. The path ahead was clouded with uncertainty, and I could feel the walls closing in around us, leaving us standing on the edge of a precipice, ready to leap into the unknown.
The soft glow of the birthday candles flickered against the darkening sky outside, a tangible reminder of the passing years. I sat at the table, surrounded by laughter and the warm embrace of family. Yet an undercurrent of tension hummed just below the surface. Emma, my daughter, was the shining star of the evening, her laughter infectious as she playfully handed me a slice of chocolate cake with the perfect amount of frosting. It was my favorite, yet my heart felt heavy, laden with the weight of something unspoken. As we gathered around the table, I felt the warmth of their love, but also a chill that crept in, threading through the moments of joy. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a celebration. Emma kept stealing glances at Jake, her husband, whispering something to him that made his brow furrow slightly. It was subtle, but I noticed. A small shift of her body, a fleeting touch of her hand on his arm, the way her eyes darted away whenever I turned my attention toward them. "Mom, make a wish," Emma chimed, her voice bright, yet tinged with an urgency that set my heart racing. I closed my eyes, the scent of vanilla and candle wax filling my lungs, but all I could think about was how fiercely I wished for clarity. I wished for understanding, for the blindfold of confusion to be lifted. The moment I blew out the candles, I felt a rush of air, like the world around me had shifted just a little. I opened my eyes, and Emma looked at me with a softness that felt almost like a plea. Was that fear I saw behind her bright smile? The thought made my stomach twist. I had always prided myself on my independence, yet in that moment I felt like a marionette, strings pulled taut by hidden hands. "Let's open presents," she announced, clapping her hands together, her voice rising with forced enthusiasm. As they brought out the carefully wrapped boxes, I tried to focus on the moment, but something gnawed at me. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, feeling the wood press against my back, grounding me even as my mind raced. As I unwrapped a beautiful scarf, the soft silk slipping through my fingers, I caught Jake's gaze. His expression was neutral, but his eyes held a hidden depth, an understanding that made my skin prickle. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he could see through the layers I had built around myself. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said to Emma, forcing a smile. But before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table, its sharp sound slicing through the air. She glanced at it, the tension tightening her shoulders, and I felt that familiar knot in my stomach tighten even more. "Excuse me for a second," she said hastily, rising from her seat and sweeping out of the room. I watched her go, her movements brisk, and the laughter around the table faded into silence, leaving only the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. "Mom," Jake's voice broke into my thoughts, and I turned to him, trying to decipher the look on his face. "I think we need to talk." The weight of those words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I nodded slowly, feeling a rush of adrenaline coursing through me. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the way his hands gripped the edge of the table, white knuckles against the dark wood. "About Emma?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked down, and for a moment, the room felt like it had shrunk around us, the walls pressing in. "She's worried about you," he admitted, and the truth behind those words struck me like a punch to the gut. "Worried about what?" I shot back, defensiveness creeping into my tone. "I'm fine. I've always been fine." "Mom, you haven't been yourself lately," he said gently, his voice steady. "She's seen the way you struggle, the way you've been isolated. She wants to help." I felt a wave of heat rush to my cheeks, a mix of anger and embarrassment flooding my senses. Help? What do you call it? Changing the locks? What does that even mean? He opened his mouth, but before he could reply, Emma returned from the hallway, her face flushed and her demeanor suddenly serious. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes darting between us, the undercurrent of tension palpable. "Just talking about your concerns for your mother," Jake said, and I could hear the warning in his tone. Emma's expression shifted, a flicker of determination ignited in her eyes. "Mom, I am not trying to control you," she said, her voice steady but pleading. "I just want you to be safe." "Safe?" I echoed, hurt bubbling to the surface like a tempest. "Is that what you call it? Locking me away? I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be protected." "Mom, please," she said, taking a step closer, her hand reaching out as if to bridge the gap between us. "It's not about that. You've been struggling, and I'm scared for you. I don't know how to help without stepping in." A silence fell, thick and heavy, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. I could feel the room closing in, the weight of their concern pressing down on me. I looked at Emma, really looked at her, and in that moment I saw the truth behind her actions, the fear of losing me, the fear that I was slipping away from her grasp. "Emma," I began, my throat tightening, "I'm not going anywhere. I may not be perfect, but I'm still here." The words felt raw and exposed, but there was a flicker of something else, a softness that emerged from the vulnerability. "You don't have to change the locks to keep me safe. I just need you to trust me." Her eyes glistened, and I could see the struggle mirrored in her expression. "But what if trusting you means watching you fall?" I felt a rush of empathy. The tightness in my chest eased just a little. "And what if I need to fall? Sometimes true freedom comes at the cost of painful truths," I said softly, my voice cracking. "I've spent so much time trying to maintain my independence, but I'm beginning to understand that I need you too." Emma took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. "I want to be there for you, Mom. I want to help you navigate this, but it's hard to know how." The honesty in her voice struck a chord deep within me. "Let's figure it out together," I replied. And in that moment, I felt a shift, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the night. As we stood there, the distance between us began to dissipate, replaced by a tentative understanding. I reached out, and Emma took my hand, squeezing it tightly, as though anchoring us both in that moment of fragile connection. Just then, Jake cleared his throat, and I could see the relief wash over him. "I'll be downstairs," he said quietly, giving us space to breathe. I nodded, grateful for his presence, even in his absence. As the door closed behind me, I turned to Emma. "No more secrets," I said, my voice stronger now, infused with a sense of hope. "Agreed," she replied, a soft smile breaking through the tension. But even as we shared that moment of understanding, a sense of unease lingered at the edges of my mind. I could still feel the weight of the unspoken truths hovering around us, waiting for a chance to surface. I knew we had taken a step forward, but there was still so much to unravel. And as I looked into Emma's eyes, I felt the gentle tug of something deeper, a realization that our journey was only just beginning, and that the complexities of love would continue to shape our paths in ways we had yet to understand. The winds of change were swirling, and as I stood at the precipice, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real test of our relationship was still ahead.